I held my daughter close against my chest, trying to ignore the cutting remarks coming from the Alpha CEO sitting in the seat beside me. Typical, he muttered, adjusting the lapels of his expensive Italian suit with deliberate precision. Omegas should know better than to bring crying children on flights. It's inconsiderate to everyone else trying to work or rest. His voice dripped with contempt, and his sandalwood scent was so overpowering that my entire body reacted instinctively. But I forced myself to ignore it. I focused instead on my Emily, who was wrapped snugly in her pastel pink blanket, sleeping peacefully in my arms. She was only 2 years old. Her tiny hand clutched my shirt as if she feared I might disappear if she let go. "She's not even crying," I said quietly, keeping my voice low but firm. I didn't bother looking at the Alpha. I'd already seen his business card when he pulled it from his laptop bag earlier. Perry Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises. Big name, bigger ego. But to me he was just another judgmental alpha who thought he owned the world. "Not yet," he replied coldly, opening his laptop with a sharp click. "But when she does start screaming, the entire flight will suffer. People like you don't understand. Single parents should just stay home where they belong." My jaw tightened, and I pulled Emily a little closer to me. Her soft baby scent, a gentle mixture of milk and lavender, helped calm the rising anger in my chest. Otherwise, I might have said something I'd regret later. A flight attendant appeared, her professional smile firmly in place. "Can I get you gentlemen anything?" "Apple juice for her," I said, gesturing toward Emily with a slight nod. "And water for me, please." Perry immediately put on his noise-canceling headphones, completely dismissing my existence as if I weren't even there. It was typical alpha behavior. I'd seen it countless times before in corporate offices, business meetings, even grocery stores. To alphas like him, omegas were either potential mates or complete nobodies. And single omega fathers, we were nothing more than a punchline to their cruel jokes. I turned my attention to the window, watching the thick white clouds drift by peacefully. Emily's breathing was steady and even, her small chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. She was probably dreaming about her favorite cartoon characters or the park where we spent our Sunday afternoons. I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead and settled back into my seat, reminding myself that we only had a few more hours until landing. I could endure Perry's silent judgment until then. Then, without warning, the plane began to shake. At first it was just light turbulence, the kind that's uncomfortable but normal. Then came a second jolt, this one much stronger and more violent. Emily's eyes flew open, wide with confusion and the beginning of fear. "Daddy?" "Shh, sweetheart. Everything's okay," I whispered, smoothing down her curls and pressing her tightly against my chest. But my heartbeat was racing. Something was wrong. I'd spent enough time in planes during my Air Force days to know this wasn't ordinary turbulence. Perry yanked off his headphones, frowning deeply. "What the hell?" Then the announcement came, and I could hear the barely controlled panic in the flight attendant's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is an emergency announcement. If there is a certified pilot on board this aircraft, please report immediately to the front galley. Our captain has lost consciousness and the co-pilot is experiencing a medical emergency. I repeat, we urgently need a qualified pilot." My breath caught in my throat. The entire cabin fell deathly silent for a moment, then erupted into frightened whispers and panicked murmurs. Perry's face went pale, all his earlier confidence evaporating in an instant, and I held Emily tighter and took a deep breath, knowing that everything was about to change. The lives of everyone on this plane, including my precious daughter, now depended on what I did next. The turbulence continued, making the overhead compartments rattle ominously. Passengers around us were gripping their armrests, some whispering prayers, others frantically texting loved ones. A woman across the aisle was crying softly into her hands. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with forced calm, but I could see the terror in their eyes. Emily whimpered against my chest. "Daddy, I'm scared." "I know, baby, but I need you to be very brave for me right now. Can you do that?" I stroked her hair, trying to keep my own voice steady even though adrenaline was flooding my system. She nodded, her brown eyes trusting me completely despite the chaos around us. I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to Perry, who was staring at his phone screen as if willing it to provide some magical solution. For the first time since we'd boarded, I looked at him directly, really looked at him. Sharp jawline, defined cheekbones, green eyes that were usually filled with arrogance, but were now wide with undisguised fear. Good. Maybe now he'd understand that he wasn't invincible. Hold her, I said firmly, already lifting Emily toward him. Perry's eyes snapped to mine, confusion and shock replacing the fear for a moment. What are you doing? Hold her tight, don't let her go. If she gets scared, talk to her gently. Keep her calm. I was already standing, my military training kicking in automatically. Are you insane? Perry awkwardly took Emily into his lap, his alpha instincts clearly struggling between the urge to protect and complete bewilderment. Where are you going? Your child will be safe with you. I interrupted, my voice carrying an authority I hadn't used in years. I looked down at Emily, whose lower lip was trembling. Baby, Daddy has to help everyone on the plane. Uncle Perry is going to stay with you. I need you to be a very good girl, okay? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely. I locked eyes with Perry one final time. I'm a pilot. He froze completely, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. What? Certified commercial pilot. Former Air Force. I retired 2 years ago when Emily's mother left us. I was already moving into the aisle, my focus shifting entirely to the crisis at hand. Over my shoulder, I added, You keep my daughter safe, Perry. If anything happens to her, I will personally make sure you regret it. Perry sat there, stunned into silence, holding Emily as if she were made of glass. All his earlier assumptions about me, about omegas, about single parents, about who deserved respect, shattered in that single moment. I strode toward the cockpit, my heart pounding but my mind clear. Flight attendants immediately cleared a path when I identified myself. This was it. Everything I'd trained for, everything I'd sacrificed, had led to this moment. Behind me, I could hear Emily's small voice asking Perry, Is my daddy a hero? I didn't hear his response. I was already focused on saving everyone aboard. The cockpit door opened, and I stepped into controlled chaos. The captain was slumped in his seat, his face an alarming shade of red, breathing shallow and labored. The co-pilot lay on a stretcher surrounded by medical personnel working frantically. Heart attack, most likely. Possibly stroke. Either way, the situation was far worse than I'd initially imagined when I heard the announcement. I can fly this aircraft, I announced, already sliding into the captain's seat and reaching for the controls. The feel of them in my hands was instantly familiar, like reuniting with an old friend I'd been forced to leave behind. Muscle memory took over immediately. I scanned the instrument panel, altitude, airspeed, fuel levels, navigation systems. Most systems were functioning normally, but the autopilot was glitching badly and manual control was absolutely necessary. Sir, we need to verify, a senior flight attendant began, her voice shaking despite her attempt at professionalism. Adam Blake. Certification number EXO47821. Air Force veteran with over 3,000 flight hours including combat situations. I said crisply, my hands already making the necessary adjustments to stabilize our descent angle. Call the tower and verify my credentials if you need to, but right now I need complete silence so I can focus on landing this plane safely. She nodded and stepped back, speaking urgently into her headset. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deliberately. My training had prepared me for high-pressure situations, but this was different. This wasn't a military operation where only combatants were at risk. This was a commercial flight filled with families, children, innocent people just trying to get home. Emily was on this plane. My daughter. Failure wasn't just unacceptable, it was unthinkable. The next 15 minutes were the most critical of my life. I brought the plane into a controlled descent, constantly monitoring every reading, every fluctuation. I maintained steady communication with the tower, coordinating every detail of the emergency landing procedure. My hands moved across the controls with precision, making countless micro-adjustments. Each second was calculated, each movement deliberate. Tower, this is Flight 84-7. Descending through 12,000 feet. Requesting priority landing clearance and emergency services on standby. I reported, my voice calm despite the sweat beading on my forehead. Flight 847. You were cleared for emergency landing on runway 27. All emergency services are in position. You're doing great, Captain Blake. Captain Blake. I hadn't been called that in 2 years. The plane shuddered as we descended through another patch of rough air. But I kept us steady. In my mind I could see Emily's face, her smile when I picked her up from daycare, her giggle when I pushed her on the swings, the way she held my hand crossing the street. I was going to get her home safely. I was going to get everyone home. Brace positions. Please, I heard the lead attendant announce over the intercom. Prepare for landing. The runway appeared through the clouds, growing larger in the windscreen. I adjusted the flaps, monitored our speed carefully, kept the nose aligned perfectly. The landing gear deployed with a reassuring thump. We were almost there. The wheels touched down with a slight bump. Not perfect, but solid and controlled. I engaged the thrust reversers and brakes, bringing the aircraft to a smooth stop well within the safety zone. Emergency vehicles were already racing alongside us, but they wouldn't be needed. We were down. We were safe. For a moment I just sat there, hands still on the controls, letting the reality of what had just happened wash over me. Then I heard it, the sound of applause erupting through the cabin, growing louder and more enthusiastic. Cheers. Relief. Gratitude. I unbuckled and stood, my legs slightly unsteady from the adrenaline crash. When I emerged from the cockpit, the entire plane gave me a standing ovation. Passengers were crying, thanking me, reaching out to touch my arm as I passed. But I barely registered any of it. My eyes found Emily immediately. She was still in Perry's arms, and he was holding her protectively, securely, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. His green eyes met mine across the cabin, and everything in them had changed. The judgment was gone. The contempt had vanished. Instead, I saw something I never expected to see from him. Genuine admiration, deep respect, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Daddy. Emily stretched her little arms toward me. I took her from Perry's lap and pulled her into the tightest hug of my life, burying my face in her hair and breathing in her sweet baby scent. I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's okay now. We're all safe. You saved everyone. She whispered in awe. You're the bravest daddy in the whole world. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. I just did what I had to do, baby. Perry stood slowly, and when I finally looked at him again, he seemed different somehow. Smaller, maybe, more human. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, apparently unable to find the right words. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. Around us, passengers continued celebrating, but I was acutely aware of Perry's presence, of the way his scent had changed, the sandalwood now mixed with something warmer, less aggressive. His whole demeanor had shifted. Thank you, he finally managed, his voice rough. For my life. For everyone's lives. I nodded curtly, still holding Emily close. I wasn't ready to forgive his earlier cruelty, wasn't ready to make nice, just because circumstances had forced him to see me differently. But I acknowledged his gratitude with a slight incline of my head before turning my attention back to my daughter. The airline staff began organizing deplaning procedures, and I learned that due to the emergency landing and the late hour, all passengers would be provided with complimentary hotel accommodations until morning flights could be arranged. As we filed off the plane, Emily heavy and sleepy in my arms, I felt the weight of everything finally settling on my shoulders. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But we were alive. We were safe, and that was all that mattered. Perry walked a few steps behind us, and I could feel his eyes on my back the entire time. Something had fundamentally changed between us in those terrifying minutes, and I had a feeling this wasn't the last conversation we'd be having. The hotel lobby was crowded with displaced passengers, all processing the trauma of what we'd just experienced in their own ways. Some were still shaking, clutching phones as they called loved ones. Others sat in stunned silence. The airline staff worked efficiently to distribute room keys and meal vouchers, their training in crisis management evident. I was shifting Emily's weight in my arms. She was nearly asleep again, completely exhausted from the fear and excitement, when Perry caught up to me near the elevator bank. Adam. Hearing him say my name for the first time sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Not unpleasant, which bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I need to talk to you. Please. I turned to face him fully. His expensive suit was wrinkled now, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. The corporate armor had cracked, revealing glimpses of the actual person underneath. His sandalwood scent was still present, but softer now, mixed with something that smelled like vulnerability. "I don't have time for this, Perry," I said, adjusting Emily so her head rested more comfortably on my shoulder. "My daughter needs rest. Today was traumatic enough for a 2-year-old, adding more stress." "5 minutes," he said, and there was a desperation in his voice that didn't match the arrogant CEO from the plane. "That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes of your time." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse purely out of principle. He'd been cruel and dismissive, and he deserved to sit with that discomfort. But Emily murmured sleepily against my neck, "Nice uncle," and I found myself sighing. "Fine. But in my room, and you keep your voice down. She needs sleep." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you." The room was modest but clean. A double bed with crisp white linens, a small desk, and a window overlooking the city lights. I laid Emily down gently, removing her shoes and pulling the blanket up to her chin. I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well, my brave girl," I whispered. She smiled without opening her eyes and curled into her favorite sleeping position. When I turned around, Perry was standing near the door, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It was soft, almost tender, completely at odds with the cold businessman I'd met hours earlier. "Say what you came to say," I prompted, crossing my arms defensively. "I was wrong." The words came quickly, no hedging or excuses. Everything I said on that plane was unforgivable. I judged you without knowing anything about you, without even trying to understand, and you saved my life. You saved everyone's lives, and I realized how completely catastrophically wrong I was about everything. I remained silent, waiting for more. Perry ran a hand through his already messy hair, clearly struggling. "I've spent my entire adult life in the corporate world, surrounded by other alphas. It's brutal, competitive, cutthroat. We're taught that omegas are weaker, that they're too emotional to handle real pressure or make tough decisions." He paused, meeting my eyes directly. "You proved every single one of those beliefs wrong in the most dramatic way possible. You were calm under impossible pressure. You made life or death decisions with perfect clarity. You saved over 200 people without hesitation." "Are you finished?" I asked, my tone still cool. "No." He took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it and stopped. "I need you to understand that my prejudice came from ignorance, not malice. That doesn't excuse it, but I want to be better. You showed me how wrong I was, and I'm grateful for that, even though the lesson was humiliating." I studied him carefully. His green eyes were earnest, his posture open rather than defensive. This didn't feel like corporate manipulation or empty platitudes. It felt genuine. "Apology noted," I said finally, softening slightly. "Now if you'll excuse me, I'd like to get some rest." "Wait." Perry's voice stopped me. "Tomorrow morning, breakfast. Let me treat you and Emily to a proper meal. Not as an apology, I know that's not enough, but because I genuinely like to get to know you both better. She's a remarkable child, and you're clearly an exceptional father on top of everything else." I should have said no. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to maintain distance, to protect myself and Emily from potential hurt, but something in his expression made me pause. "I'll think about it," I conceded. "If Emily feels comfortable with the idea, maybe." Perry's face lit up with a smile that transformed his entire appearance. Without the arrogance and judgment, he was actually quite handsome, warm even. "That's all I can ask for." "Thank you, Adam. Truly." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "And thank you again, for today, for my life. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful for it anyway." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, watching Emily sleep peacefully. My mind was racing despite my physical exhaustion. The entire day felt surreal. The emergency, the landing, Perry's complete 180 in attitude. I gently brushed Emily's curls back from her face. "What do you think, baby?" I whispered. "Should we give the grumpy uncle another chance?" She didn't answer, of course, but I thought I saw a small smile on her sleeping face. Maybe people deserved second chances. Maybe Perry's transformation was genuine. Or maybe I was just too tired to maintain my walls properly. I changed into the complimentary hotel pajamas and slid into bed beside Emily, careful not to wake her. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and decisions, Tonight, I just needed to hold my daughter close and be grateful we were both alive and safe. As I drifted towards sleep, I found myself thinking about Perry's smile, the way his scent had changed, the genuine remorse in his voice. Something had shifted between us in those terrifying moments aboard the plane. Something I didn't fully understand yet, but I had a feeling that whatever happened next would be just as life-changing as what we'd already been through. Outside the window, city lights twinkled peacefully, completely unaware that 237 lives had nearly ended today, completely unaware that my carefully controlled, predictable life was about to become anything but. Emily sighed in her sleep and snuggled closer to me. I wrapped my arm around her protectively and finally let my eyes close. Whatever tomorrow brought, we'd face it together. We always did. Morning sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains as I helped Emily into her favorite pink dress, the one with tiny flowers embroidered along the hem. "Are we seeing the nice man from yesterday?" she asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "The one who held me when you were being a hero." I smiled at her enthusiasm, kneeling to tie her shoes. "Yes, sweetheart. He invited us for breakfast. But you need to brush your teeth first and let me fix your hair properly." She cooperated beautifully, chattering the entire time about how hungry she was and whether there would be pancakes. An hour later, we made our way down to the hotel's dining area, Emily's small hand gripping mine tightly. Perry had arrived before us, and I stopped short at the sight that greeted us. The table was already set with fresh cinnamon rolls still steaming from the oven, their sweet aroma filling the air. There was hot chocolate topped with marshmallows, for Emily already cooling to a safe temperature. I noticed rich coffee for me. He'd clearly put genuine effort into this setup, paying attention to details most people would overlook. "Uncle Perry." Emily broke free from my hand and raced toward him with the fearless enthusiasm only a 2-year-old could muster. He caught her smoothly, lifting her into the air with an ease that surprised me. His laugh was nothing like the cold, dismissive sounds he'd made on the plane. This was warm, unrehearsed, completely genuine. "Good morning, princess. Did you sleep well in the big hotel bed?" "Yes. Daddy said you ordered special breakfast." She wiggled with delight. "I love cinnamon rolls more than anything." I approached the table more slowly, observing their interaction carefully. Perry settled Emily into her chair with a gentleness that seemed natural rather than forced, then looked up at me with something almost nervous in his expression. "How did you know cinnamon rolls were her favorite?" I asked, sliding into my seat and accepting the coffee he pushed toward me. Perry's ears turned slightly pink. "I asked one of the flight attendants yesterday while you were in the cockpit. I wanted to make sure Emily felt comfortable with me, so I tried to remember the little things they responded to during the chaos." I blinked, genuinely surprised. During a life-threatening emergency, with passengers panicking all around him, he'd still noticed my daughter's preferences? That level of observation spoke to something deeper than simple courtesy. "That was thoughtful," I admitted, and this time my gratitude was sincere. "Thank you." Emily immediately reached for a cinnamon roll, and I helped her tear off a manageable piece. The taste was perfect, not too sweet, with just the right amount of cinnamon and icing. Perry sipped his coffee but barely touched his own food, his attention primarily focused on me. "Adam, I'd like to know more about you. About your life. Your story. If you're willing to share, that is. I'm genuinely interested, not just making conversation." I hesitated, turning my coffee cup in slow circles. Normally I kept my personal history private, especially from relative strangers. Too many people had judged me over the years. The single Omega father raising a child alone, the former pilot who'd given up his career. But Perry didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Not after everything that had happened. Something fundamental had shifted between us. "What do you want to know?" I finally asked, watching Emily happily devour her breakfast. "Everything," Perry said simply, leaning forward with genuine interest in his posture. "You were a pilot, served in the Air Force, then became a single father. That's an incredible journey, and I'd like to understand it if you're comfortable sharing." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Emily was absorbed in her food, oblivious to the weight of the conversation about to unfold. "Emily's mother, Rebecca, and I had a complicated relationship from the start." I began slowly. "We were young when we met. I was in the middle of Air Force training. She was finishing college. When we found out Emily was on the way, We decided marriage was the right thing to do. It seemed logical at the time, traditional, what everyone expected. I paused, old memories resurfacing with their familiar ache. But Rebecca never connected with motherhood the way we both hoped she would. She felt trapped, suffocated by the responsibility. When Emily was only 6 months old, I came home from a training exercise to find a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." That was it. She was gone. Perry's jaw tightened visibly, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "She abandoned you both? Just walked away from her own child?" "Yes," I said quietly, glancing at Emily to make sure she wasn't listening. After that I realized Emily needed stability more than anything else. She needed a parent who would be present, consistent, reliable. So I made the decision to retire from active duty. I became a full-time father first, everything else second. "What about flying?" Perry asked. "That must have been a difficult sacrifice." I took some part-time cargo flight jobs for a while, mostly night runs when Emily was sleeping and I could hire a sitter. But even that became too complicated, too unpredictable. Now I work as a freelance aviation consultant from home. It pays the bills and lets me be there for Emily every single day. Perry was silent for several moments, processing what I'd shared. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of emotion I hadn't expected. "You're remarkable, Adam. Truly, you sacrificed your entire career, your dreams of flying, everything you'd worked for just to give Emily the best possible life." I shifted uncomfortably under his praise. "I'm just doing what any decent parent would do. There's nothing heroic about choosing your child over a career." "You're wrong," Perry said firmly, his green eyes intense. "Many people in your situation would have found reasons to blame someone else, to take shortcuts, to prioritize themselves. You didn't. You put Emily first without hesitation, and you've clearly done an amazing job raising her. She's happy, confident, secure. That doesn't happen by accident." My heart beat a little faster. His scent, that distinctive sandalwood, seemed warmer somehow, less aggressive than on the plane. Or perhaps I was just more receptive to it now. Emily suddenly giggled, breaking the moment's intensity. "Daddy, can Perry come visit our house? I want to show him my toy collection and my picture books." Perry's entire expression softened as he looked at her, then shifted his gaze to me with a question in his eyes. "May I? If your daddy says it's okay." I should have said no. Every protective instinct I possessed screamed that this was moving too fast, that I barely knew this man despite our dramatic shared experience. But Emily's hopeful expression and Perry's genuine sincerity wore down my resistance. "Maybe," I conceded with a small smile. "Let's see if you can prove you're not boring first." Perry's answering smile transformed his entire face, lighting up his eyes with relief and happiness. "Challenge accepted. I promise to be the most entertaining guest Emily has ever had." The rest of breakfast passed in easy conversation. Perry asked Emily about her favorite games and listened intently to her rambling stories about her stuffed animals. He asked intelligent questions, made her laugh, and never once checked his phone or seemed distracted. When we finally finished eating, Emily insisted on holding both our hands as we walked back through the lobby. She swung between us, giggling each time we lifted her off the ground for a few steps. "Higher, higher," she demanded, and Perry and I exchanged glances over her head, sharing a moment of amused understanding that felt strangely domestic. At the elevator, Perry knelt to Emily's level. "Thank you for having breakfast with me, princess. I had the best time." "Me too." She threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug that clearly surprised him, but he returned it gently, carefully, as if she were made of spun glass. When he stood, his eyes met mine. "Thank you, Adam, for giving me this chance. For not writing me off after how I behaved yesterday. People deserve opportunities to prove they can change," I said quietly. "You've made a good start." As we parted ways, I couldn't help but notice how empty the hallway felt without Perry's presence. Emily chattered about him all the way back to our room, and I realized with a mixture of hope and trepidation that something new and unexpected was beginning. Something that felt surprisingly, dangerously right. The next 2 weeks brought changes I hadn't anticipated when we first boarded that ill-fated flight. It started with simple text messages, Perry checking in with casual questions. "How is Emily today?" Or "Did she enjoy the park?" Nothing intrusive, nothing demanding, just gentle connection that gradually deepened into something more personal. He began sharing pieces of his own life, the parts hidden behind the corporate facade, the demanding parents who'd molded him into their ideal of alpha perfection, the loneliness of building an empire while forgetting to build a life, the hollow feeling of success without meaning. One evening after Emily had fallen asleep and I stood on my apartment balcony watching the stars, my phone rang. "I hope I'm not calling too late," Perry's voice came through, warm and slightly uncertain. "It's fine. Emily's asleep, and I was just thinking." I settled into the balcony chair, surprising myself with how comfortable I felt hearing from him. "My parents raised me to believe emotions were weaknesses," he said without preamble, as if continuing a conversation we'd been having. "They wanted a perfect alpha son, ruthless in business, cold in demeanor, successful above all else. So I learned to suppress everything I felt, to function like a machine programmed for profit." "That sounds lonely," I said softly. "It was. It is." He paused and I could hear city sounds in his background. He was probably in his office still, working late as usual. "I have everything society says should make me happy. Money, power, influence, respect. But it all feels empty, like I'm playing a role in someone else's story." "What would make it feel real?" I asked. "Someone who sees me, not the position I hold," he answered immediately, his honesty catching me off guard. "Someone who doesn't care about the title or the bank account. Someone who values the person underneath all the corporate armor." My breath caught. This conversation was venturing into territory I wasn't sure I was ready to explore. "Adam," Perry continued, his voice dropping lower, "more intimate. Would you be open to dinner? A real dinner? Just the three of us? I want to spend more time with you and Emily. If that's something you'd consider." Warning bells chimed in my mind. This was exactly the kind of complication I'd been avoiding for years. I didn't let alphas into my life, into Emily's life, because the risk of disruption was too high. But at the same time, Emily genuinely liked Perry, and I couldn't deny that I'd begun looking forward to his calls, his texts, his presence. "There would need to be boundaries," I said carefully. "Clear, firm boundaries. Emily's well-being comes first, always. No promises you can't keep, no commitments you're not certain about. If at any point this becomes unhealthy for her, I understand completely." Perry interrupted, his tone serious and sincere. "Emily's happiness is paramount. Yours too. I would never do anything to jeopardize either of you. You have my word." The dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday at a family-friendly Italian restaurant. Perry had researched specifically for its welcoming atmosphere and excellent children's menu. Emily was excited all week, talking endlessly about what she'd wear and what she'd tell Perry. On Saturday morning, she insisted on her pink dress again and spent 20 minutes selecting matching ribbons for her hair. She even drew a picture with her crayons. A stick figure family with a tall alpha, a shorter omega, and a small child between them. When we arrived at the restaurant, Perry was already waiting and I barely recognized him at first. Gone was the severe business suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple blue button-down that made his green eyes even more striking. He looked relaxed, approachable, younger somehow without the corporate armor. "Perry," Emily ran to him without hesitation, and he scooped her up with practiced ease now. "Look at you, princess. You're absolutely beautiful tonight." He spun her in a circle, making her squeal with delight. "Daddy helped me pick my dress and my ribbons," she announced proudly. "Your daddy has excellent taste," Perry said, his eyes finding mine over Emily's head with a warmth that made my stomach flutter unexpectedly. Throughout dinner, I watched Perry interact with my daughter with growing amazement. He listened to her nonsensical knock-knock jokes and laughed genuinely. He helped her color on the paper tablecloth the restaurant provided. He wiped sauce off her face without hesitation when she got messy with her spaghetti. When Emily presented him with her drawing, his reaction was everything a child could hope for. "This is absolutely beautiful, Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to keep this forever, I promise. It's going to go in a special frame in my office." Emily beamed with pride, and my heart squeezed at the sight. After dinner, as we walked to my car, Emily began dragging her feet with exhaustion. Perry immediately offered to drive so I could sit in back with her, and I found myself agreeing before I'd fully thought it through. Emily fell asleep within minutes, her head resting against my shoulder. Perry drove carefully, checking the rearview mirror frequently to make sure we were both comfortable. When we reached my apartment building, he carried Emily upstairs for me, moving with such care that she didn't even stir. I unlocked the door and led him to her bedroom, where he gently laid her on the bed. "You're good with her?" I whispered as we stepped back into the hallway. "She's an incredible child," Perry replied quietly. "Just like her father. Strong, sweet, special. You've raised someone truly wonderful, Adam." We were standing close, too close. I could smell his scent, that sandalwood now mixed with something warmer. Something that made my omega instincts respond in ways I'd been suppressing for years. "Perry," I started, uncertain what I was even trying to say. "I know," he whispered, but he maintained a respectful distance, not pushing, not presuming. "Boundaries. I remember, I respect them completely." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "But I need you to know something, Adam. I like you, more than I probably should after such a short time. Your strength, your dedication, the way you love Emily so completely, it's extraordinary. I want to explore this, whatever this is between us, but only at your pace, only when you're ready. No pressure, no expectations." My breath hitched. This was real. He was serious. And terrifyingly, I realized I wanted this too. "I need time to think," I managed, stepping back to create necessary space between us. "Emily has to be my priority. I can't risk disrupting her stability for something uncertain." "I'll wait as long as you need," Perry said, and despite the disappointment in his eyes, understanding shone through as well. "Not going anywhere, Adam. Take all the time you need." After he left, I stood in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the lingering scent of sandalwood, and admitted to myself what I'd been denying. I was falling for Perry Carter, and that terrified me more than any emergency landing ever could. 2 months passed in a blur of careful courtship and tentative trust building. Perry became woven into the fabric of our daily lives with such natural ease that I sometimes forgot there'd been a time before him. Morning texts became a ritual. Small check-ins that brightened my day. Evening phone calls happened after Emily went to bed. Conversations that stretched for hours about everything and nothing. Weekend outings became tradition, the three of us exploring museums, parks, children's theaters. Emily stopped calling him Uncle Perry and started saying just Perry, as if he were already family. And I found myself missing him acutely when he wasn't around, his absence leaving a Perry-shaped hole in my days. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He respected every boundary I set, never crossed a line, remained patient while I worked through my fears and hesitations. Then, on an ordinary Sunday morning, everything changed. The knock on my door was unexpected. When I opened it, I froze completely. Rebecca stood in my hallway, tears streaming down her face, looking nothing like the woman who'd walked away 3 years ago. "Adam." Her voice cracked on my name. "Please. I need to talk to you. I know I have no right to ask, but please." My heart plummeted into my stomach. Emily was in the living room playing with blocks, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break over our lives. "What are you doing here, Rebecca?" I kept my voice low, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door mostly closed behind me. "I was wrong. About everything." She was openly crying now, her hands twisting together anxiously. "I've been in therapy for over a year, working through everything. I miss Emily so much it physically perfect. I miss you. I know I destroyed our family, but I've changed. I'm different now. Please, just give me one chance to prove it." I stood there completely stunned. This was a scenario I'd never even considered. Rebecca returning, wanting back into our lives after all this time. Part of me burned with anger. How dare she show up now after 3 years of silence? How dare she think she could waltz back in as if she hadn't abandoned us? But another part of me wondered if Emily deserved the chance to know her biological mother. If that was a right I could ethically deny her. "This isn't something we can discuss in a hallway," I finally said. "I need time to process this. Emily's well-being is the only thing that matters here." "I understand. I'll wait. As long as it takes." Rebecca's desperation was palpable. "Just, please consider it. Please." After she left, I returned to my apartment feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Emily looked up from her blocks with a sunny smile. "Who was at the door, Daddy?" "Nobody important, sweetheart. Keep playing." The lie tasted bitter. I immediately called Perry. needing his perspective, his grounding presence. Rebecca came back, I said without preamble when he answered. She wants to see Emily, says she's changed, she's in therapy, she's ready to be a mother now. Perry was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. This is ultimately your decision to make, Adam. You're Emily's parent, the one who's been there every day. But I want to remind you of something important. Emily is happy right now. She's thriving, stable, secure in the life you've built for her. And you deserve happiness too. Don't sacrifice your peace or Emily's stability because of guilt or societal expectations about biological parents. But what if Rebecca really has changed? I argued, even though I didn't believe it myself. Don't I owe it to Emily to at least consider? Then make Rebecca prove it, Perry interrupted firmly. Supervised visits, legal documentation, therapy verification. Slow, gradual introduction if and only if Emily seems receptive. But protect yourself and your daughter first. Always. His words settled something in me. He was right. The next day I met with Rebecca at a neutral location, a coffee shop far from my apartment. I laid out my terms in clear, non-negotiable language. Emily's custody remained entirely with me. Rebecca could have limited, supervised visits on a schedule I controlled. Legal agreements would be signed. Her therapy would continue with verification. The moment Emily showed any sign of distress or confusion, visits would stop immediately. Rebecca agreed to everything with desperate eagerness. The first visit was awkward and strange. Emily looked at Rebecca with polite confusion. Who is this lady, Daddy? I knelt beside my daughter, choosing my words carefully. This is Rebecca. She knew you when you were a very tiny baby. She'd like to spend a little time getting to know you now, if that's okay with you. Emily was courteous but distant, her natural friendliness tempered by uncertainty. Rebecca tried too hard, her eagerness making Emily withdraw further. Over the following weeks, Emily gradually became more comfortable during the supervised visits. But Rebecca never became Mom. She remained Rebecca, someone familiar but peripheral, not central to Emily's world. And watching this unfold helped me realize something crucial. I was ready. Ready to stop holding my heart so carefully guarded. Ready to trust someone with the precious parts of myself I'd been protecting for so long. One evening when Emily was at a supervised visit with Rebecca, with my most trusted babysitter present, I invited Perry to my apartment. Just the two of us. He arrived looking uncertain, concerned. Is Emily okay? You sounded strange on the phone. She's fine. She's with the babysitter. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I asked you here because I needed to tell you something. Without Emily present. Just us. Perry's expression shifted to cautious hope. I'm listening. I'm ready. I said simply, to try this. Really try. Not just careful friendship. If you still want that. If you're still interested in. He kissed me before I could finish the sentence. It was soft, gentle, respectful. Everything I'd hoped for and nothing I'd expected. When we pulled apart, I was breathless. My heart raced. I've been ready since the moment you walked out of that cockpit, Perry whispered, his forehead resting against mine. I've been waiting for you to be ready too. And I'll keep waiting for whatever you need. For as long as you need it. That night, for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different future. One where I wasn't alone. Where Emily had more than just me. Where happiness wasn't something I observed from a distance, but something I actively participated in. Emily, Perry, me, an imperfect, unexpected, absolutely beautiful family we'd somehow built from the wreckage of an emergency landing. Later, as Perry held me on the couch while we talked about our hopes and fears and dreams, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Rebecca left. Completeness. Not because Perry filled some void. I'd been whole on my own. But because he added something I hadn't known was missing. Partnership. Companionship. The quiet joy of being truly seen and valued. Thank you, I whispered into the comfortable silence. For what? Perry asked, his fingers running gently through my hair. For being patient. For seeing past your own prejudices. For loving Emily so completely. For waiting for me. Always, he promised. For both of you, always. And I believed him.